Good afternoon. My name is Joe Sopcich, and I'm the Executive Vice President of Administrative Services here at Johnson County Community College. And on behalf of our trustees, our president, Terry Calloway, faculty, staff, and the 20,000 plus credit students and 10,000 plus continuing ed students who use this facility every semester, welcome to our college. We are thrilled with being able to host this stop on the listening tour. It's not the big first listening tour.
It's not anymore, no.
It's listening tour. Today it's my honor to introduce Senator Jerry Moran. As we all know, Senator Moran won last November's election with 70% of the votes. Prior to... Oh. This is going to be a very good audience. Prior to his Senate victory, he served as a member of the United States House of Representatives, representing Kansas's 1st Congressional District from 1997 to 2011. During those elections for Congress, he never faced serious opposition. In fact, in 2006, he garnered nearly 80% of the vote. That's 70% disappointing.
That's good.
While in the House, he served on the Agriculture Committee, the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and the Veteran Affairs Committee. Prior to serving at the federal level, he was in the Kansas Senate from 1989 to 1997, serving 2 years as the Vice President and his last 2 years as Majority Leader. In 1976, Jerry earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Economics from the University of Kansas. He briefly worked as a banker and then enrolled in law school and received his Juris Doctor from the University of Kansas Law School in 1982. When Jerry was elected to Congress, he was not intimidated by representing a district that measured 55,000 square miles. He launched an annual Big First Listening Tour in which he held town meetings in each of the 69 counties he represented. In fact, he's conducted over 900 town hall meetings, which must be a Guinness record. Now he's going to cover the entire state of Kansas with his listening tour, and he will touch all 105 counties. But forget all the accomplishments and the accolades, all the things that Jerry has done. Jerry doesn't have to go on a listening tour to listen. Whenever and wherever we see Jerry, he's always interested in our college. He'll always ask us, how are things going? What can we do to make things work better? And what stands out to us when he does this is that he's genuine and he's sincere in his interest. And he doesn't always agree with us either. When we go up and ask Jerry for a big appropriation, he always has a one-word answer for us.
You're winning my crowd over.
But that's why we respect Jerry, and that's why we're glad he's our senator. Jerry?
Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you. Does my voice carry sufficiently? Great. I hate being behind a podium. Thank you all very much for being here. The room was set up for 100. I think we've exceeded that capacity, and I'm honored that Johnson County Community College would host us for this, my 38th Town Hall meeting of 2011. That sounds like lots of Town Hall meetings, but if you subtract 38 from 105, there's still a ways to go. But this has been an important component of who I am, how I do my job in Washington, D.C., and I try to take back, in fact, I hope I can tell you that I take back just good judgment and common sense given to me by Kansans as we have a conversation on an ongoing basis. And a large part of this listening tour began with my predecessor in the 1st District of Kansas, Pat Roberts, and who now joins us today as part of our town hall meeting. And I'm honored to have the senior senator from the state of Kansas with us today, and also your new U.S. Representative, Kevin Yoder. And my hope here is that we limit our remarks to just an opening few sentences and spend the significant time of the afternoon that we have in conversation, dialogue, and questions, complaints, marching orders, suggestions, and instructions. A number of us have deadlines to catch flights late this afternoon, early this evening, and so we're going to have to be reasonably certain of a concluding time. And from my view, it's probably better for you to have the opportunity to make your case and for us to respond than it is otherwise for us to filibuster. And so maybe after I've been in the Senate longer, I will appreciate that opportunity to keep talking, Senator Roberts. And we just came from another event in which he complimented me for being a listening senator. I complimented him for being a speaking senator. And it is a great honor to serve in the United States Senate on your behalf and with a colleague who is a longtime friend and advocate for the way that we live our lives in Kansas and a patriot who cares about the future of our country. So it's a real pleasure that Senator Roberts joins us today. Just a couple of observations, and then let's hear from Kevin and from Pat, but then let's hear from you. That observation is that, in my view, our country is financially broke. And that means that we cannot have politics or business as usual. Decisions that will be made in our nation's capital are not ones that every American is going to appreciate. Decisions that we make it difficult for certain organizations and individuals to get what they think they need in spending from our federal government. But if we don't address this issue, it only becomes worse, not better, including for those people who are looking for dollars from the federal government today. In every town hall meeting, I've asked my constituents to begin to understand or to reward elected officials who say no, rather than the past experience in which we applauded those who said yes. It's become too common in Washington, D.C., or it became too common in Washington, D.C., for us to expect something from government, and that's the circumstance that got us in the circumstance that we're in. In my view, the focus of this Congress in 2011 has to be reining in spending, reducing the government borrowings, and get this country on track for a pro-growth, job creation environment in which the business community in Johnson County and elsewhere can make a decision that now is the time to hire somebody, to add plant and equipment, to grow the economy and put people to work.
Amen.
Thank you. I think in our efforts sometimes to talk about the value of cutting spending, we miss the point. And I, as elected official, need to do a better job of explaining this. It's not about necessarily a philosophy. It's not about a fight between Republicans and Democrats in Washington, D.C. It's not about counting the beans, so to speak. We need to understand that if we fail to get our financial house in order, there are consequences to everyday Americans, to everyone in this room. And it's not about a battle that is a political thing in Washington, D.C. that plays out on the nightly news. It's not the constant game of politics in which we just think that the people in Washington, D.C. are having fun scoring points on the other team. The consequences of this debate, the outcome of this conversation, and the ultimate voting of determining how much money we spend determines whether or not our economy is going to grow and whether people in Kansas and across the country have had the ability to save for their own retirement, save for their kids' education, and have the opportunity to have gainful and meaningful employment in our economy. In the absence of doing what needs to be done in reducing spending, it means that interest rates will rise. It means that inflation will return. It means that our lives as individuals in this country will be damaged significantly, and our ability for the next generation of Americans to pursue their dream is diminished. And so it's something more than just a philosophical battle. We are not immune from what has happened in Japan. We are not immune from what's going on in Portugal and Ireland. If we don't right the course, then the world economics are going to take place of our decision-making process, and we will discover that we are living in a country with a standard of living significantly less than it is today. So when we think about reducing spending, my hope is that we can reach the understanding that this is something more than just an academic discussion about balancing the books. It's about whether there is a future for Americans and their children. And then secondly, while reducing spending sometimes is the negative, and I agree it's not a lot of fun to talk about these kinds of things, but the other aspect of this agenda is growing the economy. It is a way to help us get out of debt, which is to put people to work and more people to become taxpayers. More success means that we are generating the revenues to get us out of the deficits that we are in. We are, at the moment, the House and the Senate have agreed to reduce spending for the next 2 weeks by $4 billion. You should not congratulate us or pat us on the back. The national debt is increasing $5 billion a day. You may have seen the YouTube video that my kids had to open up the computer for me and show me how to look at a YouTube video, in which you see the guy with all the pennies. It's a very telling story, and as far as I can tell, it's true. And for those who haven't seen it, the guy stacks pennies, 5 of them each $100 million, across his dining room table. He takes the last penny, hundreds of thousands, that's probably not true, thousands, I'm a politician trying to exploit the opportunity, thousands of pennies on the table, takes the last penny, cuts it in half, cuts that half in half, and takes the 1/4 of 1 penny and say, this is what we're talking about in reducing spending. So this cannot be something that is insurmountable. I would say that while the House and Senate work out this continuing resolution, which is about this year's spending, the next 7 months, we need to get this one resolved quickly. This ought not be the drama that it's become, because what follows is the budget and appropriation bills for the next year. And then while we're having that debate and arguing over about this relatively small amount of money, we are missing the point about how do we address the ever-increasing costs and the deficits, the out-of-balance circumstance that our entitlement programs face today in Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. So, as I say, we can spend a bunch of time about the 1/4 of 1 penny, but we ought not spend any longer than we have to, because we got to get to the bigger picture items than what we're talking about today in Washington, D.C. And we got to get to the point in which we are talking about, and not just talking, but resolving, issues related to growing our economy. And those issues, in my view, revolve around having a tax code that is fair. I'll play you. There we go. A tax code that is fair, that is certain, so that people know what the tax code is going to be, that encourages the investment and creation of jobs, a regulatory environment that is totally different than the one we have today. The most common conversation I have with a small business owner in Kansas is, what next is the federal government going to do to put me out of business this year? The uncertainty that comes with new regulations, and Senator Roberts is the champion in the Senate of trying to undo the things that need to be done in regard to over-regulation of our economy, but a tax code and a regulatory environment that tells a business person, or just a person who wants to go to work and earn a living, that you can do it in this country and you'll be rewarded, not penalized. And finally, and this is such an appropriate time to tell Congress, to tell Americans, we've got to do something about an energy policy that leaves us so dependent upon foreign oil and $3.50 a gallon gas. The things that we may do in Washington, D.C., if we're successful in getting a regulatory and tax environment that encourage business development and job creation, may be frittered away if we don't get a policy in place that quits spending $800 billion of our dollars buying foreign oil from a part of the world that doesn't like us and would be happy to use some of that money to end our way of life. So we ought to have a broader agenda. Yes, argue about whether we're going to cut $61 billion or, as the President proposes, $6 billion, reach a conclusion on that and move on to the bigger picture items of how do we get this country on a solid footing so that we can get America to be the country that we know it can be. This is a positive story. This is not about being pessimistic about our country's future. We can make decisions today. The common sense and good judgment of Kansans can guide us to do that. We don't have to spend our time bemoaning the fact that we can't spend money like we want to. We ought to be out here talking about the opportunity that we have to help Americans, and especially Kansans, find gainful employment, put food on their families' tables, save for their kids' college education, and get their own retirement in shape so they can live the dream life that they set out a long time ago to pursue. And so I look forward to having the conversation with you about what it is that you think we ought to be doing, what your advice and suggestion is. As I say, that a number of us are headed to the airport, so you are our last dose of Kansas common sense and good judgment before we return to Washington, D.C. On Monday. And let me, in that regard, introduce my colleague, the senior senator from the state of Kansas, your Senator Pat Roberts.
Wait a minute, he's got to turn it on. Turn me on, man. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me in the back? Okay, all those that have a seat next to them, you could raise your hand. We got a lot of folks in the back. Anybody have a seat right over here?
One on the front row.
Right over here.
We're going to auction them off and pay down the debt.
I hear 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 15. Okay, just come down here. No, don't stop. Where was it? Where was that seat over here? Okay, right over here. There you go, ma'am. There's the guy that is going to rebound the ball. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule and coming out to hear Jerry. This was his listening tour, and the difference between this past election and now and prior to that is that we were all in the same area, and so now we have an opportunity as a team effort to work together in your behalf. And I'm not saying that from a partisan standpoint. I'm just saying as the senior senator, we have been meeting every week. We talk about no surprises. It isn't that I expect everybody will vote exactly alike, but we do know that despite our individual concerns and our individual ideology or whatever we believe in, and I think most of us believe in the same thing. In fact, I'm sure of it, because that's what we all campaigned on. But basically that it allows us to understand what Jerry is talking about, that this transcends any differences that we may have, and that the issue is of such tremendous importance for our kids and grandkids to keep the America that we know and that we love and that we want to save. That's the big issue, not to mention our national security. Two big items that right now we have a lot of challenges ahead. So no matter what it is in terms of looking in the weeds, if you will, on our individual committee assignments, we know there are two bigger issues out there, and quite frankly, it's to save America, or at least save the America that we knew, we appreciated, we grew up in, for our kids and grandkids. So Jerry just nailed it. Now, Jerry talked about a listening tour. The only thing that I would add to that is that quite some time ago, it was my pleasure to go around a 52-county district at that particular time, and then it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew because of the population outflow from western Kansas. But it was Keith Sebelius, that's the good Sebelius. It was Keith Sebelius who, I'm not trying to be partisan here, I'm just saying the way it is, man. But at any rate, it was Keith Sebelius who said to his constituents, "You elect me and I'll come back right after the election." What a novel thought. And so what did Jerry do? Said, "You elect me and I'll go right back out to the 105 counties, not 69, but 105 counties. I don't know which county, I don't know which number of county, Jerry, which one is it?"
This is 38.
This is number 38. He's like Jerry Lee Lewis. He's out there somewhere playing. I mean, it's amazing. And so he has probably the best advice and counsel from people who attend listening tours of any member of the delegation, although we all do that. I know Kevin does it, I do it, and we do it constantly. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm on the Finance Committee. That's the committee that will take up alleged tax reform. That's why I have the button up here. The only thing that worries me is how we get there from here in terms of the pain, suffering, and where we're going to end up. We had an 86 tax bill I voted against some time ago. I understand that, but we ended up in the ditch with some of our financial institutions and agriculture. We don't want to do that. That's not the intent of this bill. Fair tax means all segments of society have to pay, and if we're going to do something about Medicare, and if we're going to do something about Medicaid, and if we're going to do something about Social Security, the entitlements, if you will, we're going to have a stream of revenue to help us do that. Let me say that I share Jerry's disappointment in regards to, I'm just going to say it, I just wish the President would lead more. During his State of the Union address, he mentioned the debt one time. You cannot kick the can down, well you can kick the can down the road one more time, but you know we're not going to do this in 2012. That's an even numbered year, and you know what that means. This is the time for us to take the action that we need to take. So we'll talk about the spending cuts, and yes, they are minimal in regards to the total budget deficit and our debt. $14.3 trillion and climbing dramatically. One of these days, somebody is not going to service our debt. Everybody ready to speak Chinese? I mean, the President punted the ball, it went out on the 41, and the Chinese have the ball. And this is serious stuff. And you never know when that thing's going to teeter over and somebody is going to say, we're not going to service your debt. And at that particular time, we're all going to figure out just how important that is. Every tax dollar you send in, 41 cents goes immediately just to pay the interest. That sure doesn't leave more for education, health care, agriculture, all the things, energy, financial institutions, all the things where we think it touches our daily lives and pocketbooks. So I'm simply repeating Jerry's speech. There's one other thing I want to mention to you. Our first obligation in Washington is to provide whatever we can, whatever we think is adequate, and then a little more for our national security. So that we can be fair and proud and stand behind our American men and women in uniform with the job that they have to do overseas, or the job that we in Congress and the President determine that they have to do. Ladies and gentlemen, the world is going through a very unique time, unprecedented time. You know that. You read the papers, you hear it all the time on television. I'm not too sure you hear it somehow through that portrayal. It comes a little twisted, but at any rate, here's the deal. You have contagion of freedom spelling all throughout the Middle East, in countries where we never dreamed that would happen, especially Egypt. And now we have Libya. So we have a great debate on the part of the administration. Well, I want everybody in my administration to give me contingencies, and then we'll pick the best. And we're studying this. In the meantime, you have Great Britain and you have Germany and you have France saying, we will fly a no-fly zone. We're going to stop the murdering Gaddafi, if you will, and hopefully get rid of him. And then the forces of liberty, if we can say that, we don't know what it's going to morph into, but at least we have a shot and we at least are on the right-hand side. No. Now listen, I just want to tell you something. It doesn't have to be a debate over a no-fly zone. I mean, that takes a great effort on the part of our military. And yes, we are thin in regards to our obligations. Now, it does, however, there are contingencies, and the President has them. I don't know why he called for more. He already has them. Within the intelligence community, within our armed forces, all you got to do is take care of the runways. You take care of the runways with a couple of bombing rays where the surface-to-air missiles supplied by the Russians, I don't think that would really take place given the kind of operation it would be. So it's not really necessary to get into a no-fly zone, but at least you would prove to the folks who allegedly are fighting for freedom. I don't know where this is going to morph. I don't know where it's going to go. But I worry that about every day we have an announcement, and then there's a couple more days go by, and then people try to catch up as best they can. And we need to get on top of this, it seems to me, and be much more aggressive in that arena. I am very happy now to turn the lectern over to your congressman, and I note he is wearing a purple tie celebrating the K-State win, and I'm going to catch a lot of flack because of that, but you know that's just the way it is. Kevin comes to us from the state legislature. He's been a leader there. He ran a great campaign and he won. He's on the powerful appropriations committee. He hit the ground running. He's an outstanding member of Congress. We're just delighted to have him part of the team. Thank you all for coming, and I will stay around until my staff drags me out to catch a plane. Kevin Yoder.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, both senators. Thank you to Senator Moran for arranging this. It's a great opportunity not only to hear from, hopefully, the brand new congressman, but two senators at the same time. I think that's a treat even for me to hear what's going on over in the Senate. And I'll tell you, no fault of these two guys, but there's not a lot happening in the Senate right now. We've been sending bills over there left and right, and we're not getting much back. So put some pressure on them over there like I know you guys do. We're very fortunate, I think, to have a very strong delegation. You have Senator Roberts, who's truly one of the statesmen in the U.S. Senate. He's been there for a few terms now and is one of the old guard, the folks that try to do the right thing. They're statesmen, not overly partisan, works to focus on the issues, and so we're very fortunate to have Senator Roberts. And then Senator Moran, we have a brand new freshman senator, so we almost have the best of both worlds there with the two of them working together. I know Senator Moran's working extremely hard to get across the state. So I'm pleased to be here today, and I'm pleased to be 60 days into this brand new term. As you know, on January 5th, the new Congress was sworn in. I had the privilege of casting my first vote in that new Congress, and that was a vote for John Boehner for Speaker of the House. And that was a really historic moment as the leadership of the House changed from Nancy Pelosi to John Boehner. And I know that was an issue for some people here. I committed that was probably one of the most important votes we were going to cast in this Congress. We are embarking upon some very, very difficult issues. As you can imagine, you walk into Congress, you're a freshman, there's a $14 trillion debt. We're running a $1.5 trillion deficit. We're borrowing 40 cents out of every dollar we spend in Washington. It is a mess. And there is a culture in Washington that is so against responsibility and is so against reducing spending, so against the very principles that built this country. The idea of free enterprise, the idea that small businesses and entrepreneurs and innovators here in Kansas create jobs, not bureaucrats and big spenders in Washington. And it's going to take all that we can do to wake these folks up there and to get them to understand that they're heading down the wrong track, and we've got to change the way we do business in Washington. I've been pleased to be part of a new majority that is working towards many of these goals. Early on, the first thing we did, the day after we were sworn in, we read the U.S. Constitution on the House floor. First time in U.S. history that the United States Constitution has ever been read on the House floor. Isn't that amazing? And the reason we did that is because we know that the federal government has gotten so big and so expansive, and it's gotten so far beyond what our founders intended, that there really isn't anything that the folks in Washington don't think is their business at this point. And because it's gotten so big and because it's gotten so expansive, guess what? We can't pay our bills. And in fact, we're doing so many things, we're not really good at the basic things. We're not really good at the core functions. And so I really feel strongly that we've got to get back to a constitutional form of government. We've got to focus on the 10th Amendment. There are things that the states can do much better than the federal government. A one-size-fits-all model on many of these things coming out of Washington costs us more money, it's more bureaucratic, and ultimately we produce a lower quality result because of the national one-size-fits-all model. It doesn't work for every state. So we brought a new philosophy to Washington, one that's going to focus on free enterprise, getting jobs created back at home, and reducing the size of federal spending. Now, the things we've been doing so far to move down that road, the second week we were there, we passed a repeal and a 245 to 189 vote of last year's passed health care bill. And that bill passed last year, a completely partisan vote. Not one member of the Republican Party voted for it. The bill we passed, we actually picked up 3 Democrats that voted for the repeal. But we know in order to have successful health care reform in this country, we've got to have a bipartisan bill. We have a Senate that's run by Majority Leader Reid. We have a President and President Obama. We want to fix this bill and make it better. We voted for a repeal. The Senate took it up. Both our senators voted for repeal. They couldn't get the votes to get it done. We don't have the votes in the Senate. Majority of the governors in this, majority of the states in this country are suing the federal government over this. In fact, 2 judges have found the individual mandate to be unconstitutional. 1 judge found the entire bill, therefore, to be unconstitutional. So we've got to get back in, no matter where you are on this bill. And I know it's a very divisive issue, not across this country, probably even in this room, and intelligent minds can disagree, and I fully admit that. But wherever we are, we can do better than the bill that was put together last year. And that's what I'm committed to doing, is putting together a bill that truly tries to reduce costs and improve the healthcare system in this country. We have passed every week a bill to cut some level of spending in government. We're doing a bill each week. You can go to the Majority Leader, Eric Cantor's website, Google UCut, and you can find, you can go and vote on what you think we should bring to the floor to cut spending. We then led on a bill that would cut $61 billion, and senators have alluded to that. $61 billion we passed out of the House that would fund government until the end of September. Now, just a little bit of inside stuff here. What's happened is our budgets in Washington run October 1 to September 30. That's the fiscal year in Congress. And the budget, last year there was no budget that was passed. So you can imagine with all the spending issues, there was no appropriations bill that happened. They passed what they call a continuing resolution, and it continues to spend money at the same level. We came into Congress, that continuing resolution expires on March 4th, so that was 2 days ago. And we had to pass a bill in order to continue to have government function, and we're committed to reducing spending. $61 billion, although it is just the beginning of an effort to balance this budget, that bill is 5 times larger than any other cuts bill that's passed Congress in history. Isn't that amazing? Our deficit's $1.5 trillion. We passed a $61 billion bill, and that's 5 times more. What we have here is a culture of always growing, always expanding, always adding employees, always adding bureaucrats. I sit on the Appropriations Committee. I'm honored to be your voice on the Appropriations Committee as a freshman. There's only 3 freshmen on that committee out of 50. The only one on the House side in Kansas doing that. And Senator Moran serves on the Senate version of the Appropriations Committee, so you've got folks on each side here working on this. But we're having these subcommittee meetings. We're hearing from the folks who are running these departments. And case after case after case, there are examples of projects that have overrun cost, programs that have gone beyond their original intent. And what I've found out is that a lot of times we have these reports and some of these inspections we've done, they say that the reason these things are going up, a project's overrun, it's not because of the contract we hired. It always comes back to poor management, changes after the fact, too many people trying to fix things, too many folks, too many chefs in the kitchen, and what we end up getting is a government that's running out of money day after day. And so we've been focusing in that committee on finding ways to reduce spending. We're going to continue to do that. We have to simultaneously work on this continuing resolution that will expire again now in 12 days, because we only passed a temporary one last week because the other bill we passed could not make it through the Senate. So we're working on trying to find a permanent solution and make real tangible reductions. And that's a lot of hard work and something that I am very much engaged in and really have a real respect for the work we have to do there. We've been up to several other things. This last week we passed what was a real source of frustration to a lot of small businesses coming up, and that's this provision of the health care bill that requires every business in this country, if they do over $600 in transactions with another business, to fill out IRS 1099 paperwork. Now, do we want to be a bureaucratic country that's filling out paperwork, or do we want to be a country that produces jobs, that produce goods? When we do this to small businesses, it's a cost to them. They have to hire people. I've talked to businesses who are focused on having to hire people just to fill out IRS paperwork. And then the IRS is coming to us saying they need more agents to come out and investigate the small businesses to make sure they're filling out the paperwork. So I was pleased we passed a bill, a huge bipartisan bill actually, over 300 votes, and got that passed in the House to repeal the 1099 provision. I think that was a big bill to get passed. And I don't know if that's on the way over to the Senate. I think the Senate's already passed a version of that as well. So we're probably really close to getting that done. And I think the President's willing to sign it. But we did have Minority Leader Pelosi voted against it still. I don't know how in good faith, how you justify the reasonableness of that provision. I just don't know how you argue that. So we got that done. We're 60 days in. There's a lot on the agenda besides spending, getting small businesses, getting the country back to work again. Unemployment still hovers around 9%. We got the numbers last week, 8.9%. And we know that number is really probably lower than the actual unemployment. The people that are underemployed, the folks that who run small businesses, haven't taken a paycheck, the people who have fallen off the unemployment rolls. And so we know we still have a huge economic crisis in this country, a huge unemployment crisis. And what I know is that greater taxation, greater spending, greater deficits, and more regulations aren't going to help. What we've got to do to get this country going again is we've got to keep the tax burden low. We've got to get the federal government to live within its means, just like all of you have to do, just like even our states try to do. We've got to get the federal government to live within its means, and we've got to reduce the amount of rules and red tape and regulations like the 1099 form provision that's bearing down upon business that don't help them create jobs. We know, as Kansans, that jobs are created by people with ideas here in Kansas who want to risk their capital, want to hire some people, borrow a little money, build a business. That's the essence of what built Kansas. We've got to get back to those core principles if we want to rebuild America. Washington's got to change because they're not going in that direction. I want to tell you just a couple logistical things. As you know, as a new congressman, we're getting our office set up. I'm in the Cannon building in Washington, D.C. I hope you'll all please come up and see me. It's your office. Come in, hang your jacket up, kick your feet up. That's the office of the people of the 3rd District. And so I want you to feel always welcome. My staff is here to serve you. Please call them if you have questions or concerns. And I know many of you called in already and told us what you think about legislation. I need that. I appreciate that feedback very much so. So please continue to do that. We have an office open right now in Kansas City in the Dole Courthouse for our local office, and we're working on getting one set up here in Johnson County, negotiating some leases and stuff. So we're getting to that point where we're going to have a local office for you here, provide top-notch constituent services. Because beyond the things I want to do in Congress, my #1 goal is to listen and to be your voice in the halls of Congress. you know, we're not always going to agree on the solutions. Some of these issues are 50-50. But you're sharing your positions with me and telling me what you think is crucial to me. I also want to let you know that we have a Twitter account, Rep. Kevin Yoder, at Rep. Kevin Yoder, and a Facebook account, Congressman Kevin Yoder. And I'm one of the few, at least I know one other, that we tweet and Facebook every vote I take. So when I take a vote on the House floor, we post the vote, the count of the vote, how I voted, so you know immediately. You don't have to wonder and guess. And a link to the bill, so you can see the bill I just voted on, and a link to all the other votes. And I just think that's a great way to communicate with folks who care and want to know how I'm voting on things immediately. You can find out right there. So please come on our website, sign up for our newsletter, express your views to me. We intend to do a lot of town hall meetings. We had one in January, I had one in February, now we're having one in March. We're going to keep doing that. I'm going to try to have as many as I can. I come back every weekend. I want to be back here in the district, visiting with voters. I'm like all of you. I'm a Kansan. I'm fifth generation Kansan, grew up on a farm in rural Kansas. I love Kansas, and I want to stay here for the rest of my life, and so I enjoy the opportunity to be in D.C. during the week to work for all of you, but to be back home with my wife, who I hadn't introduced yet, Brooke, who's here with us today as well. And with that, I think it's a good opportunity to maybe pause and bring our great senators up and maybe take some questions.
Questions? Yes, sir.
I'm concerned about security. There is the saying that too often generals are fighting the last war. At the moment, we're spending more on our military bases around the world than the rest of the world combined, including our allies. And I've been told in a number of instances that that's the greatest recruiting tool that non-state aligned terrorists have. That there were 243 terrorist attacks in 2000 and 10,999 terrorist attacks in 2009. Our greatest danger today is not that Russia is going to attack us, not that Germany is going to attack us, but rather that non-state aligned terrorists are going to attack us. And as they say, the bank robbers rob the bank because that's where the money is. And it's very clear the military is where the money is. And I'm not opposed to military spending. I just want smart military spending that's dealing with today's security issues, not yesterday's security issues that happened during the Cold War. We need to get smart, update our where our focus is, and that's more than 1/4 cent out of that whole batch of money. I'd appreciate your thoughts.
Please.
Thank you for that question, and it touches on what we all believe and know, and that's our first obligation to you all as members of the federal government, that's to provide our national security. There was a recent article that I read. It's not part of that GAO report that just popped out, and I hope you all get on Google or whatever it is, and maybe you can make that available on your website. I'm still back in the typewriter and the carbon paper age, so, you know. But I do Facebook and I do tweet. There's over 800, probably 850 bases all over this world that we still have. Now you can't tell me with a base that's been there over 50 years that we can't do something about that in terms of reducing our footprint, or at least from a geopolitical standpoint, okay, it might be valuable, but what about savings? I mean, you've got over 800 of them. Certainly we can close some. Now, I will tell you that everybody says, well, let's cut spending except defense. Oh, no. Oh, no. Defense is being cut. I am the last active Marine in the United States Senate. And so, consequently, I'm not happy with this budget. They canceled the Marines' latest amphibious landing ship, or its landing, I don't know what to call it. It's not only a vehicle to get you to the shore, but fights like a tank later. Right. Well, I'm sorry, that's been canceled. And then the B-22, sorry. And then the entire Marine Corps is going down from 220,000 down to 180. So if you say send in the Marines in terms of hot spots around the world, we may not have enough. So you have to be careful that you don't take a Lizzie Borden meat axe to it as opposed to a scalpel. I think this latest development in the Mideast, and given our situation in Afghanistan and Iraq, we need a reset, if you will, on our national security plans in regards to our policy, our national security policy. It'd be a good time for the President to step back along with his national security advisors, those who serve on the Armed Services Committee, those who serve on the Intelligence Committee, sit back, try to work together and say, oh, wait a minute, we can't afford all this. We don't want to be isolationists, but we have to be forward-thinking to really take a look at what and where does it come from represents a direct threat to our national security. I'll just add one other thing. Sooner or later, we got to get out of that damn desert.
We decided we would not all try to answer the same question, so it doesn't occupy the whole afternoon. Yes, sir.
I have a question too. I think really relevant to our discussion here are really several points. You know, I'm a registered independent at this point. This is obviously feels like a pretty much a Republican government, gathered here today. But anyway, I want to say two years ago we were here and we were ready to say throw out the Wall Street bonds. The people that really hurt us in terms of our savings and our long-term and again, if you're telling me less government, less government, less government, number one is, so what do you propose to keep this balance between academia, between Wall Street and Washington aligned so that we don't all get taken advantage of as we have? That's number one about the argument against small government. Secondly, I'm a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. I work for the community mental health system. I've done that in Hayes in your district. I've done it in Salina, and I'm now here in the Kansas City area. 25% of our children now live in poverty. And we are expecting our teachers to be able to say, well, no child left behind, but we don't ask the question about what are these teachers asked to be, what are they expected to be working with in terms of the children who are ill-parented, children who are victims of neglect and abuse, that we sort of feel badly about for a while, but yet we'll build prisons later to house these people. Okay? So, and thirdly, I think the other part is, my question is about what about the social safety net we're going to go cut, and what I hear from Washington is NPR. We're going to cut. Planned Parenthood. We're cutting the. More unplanned pregnancies in this country.
No, that's true. Sorry, but I got to take it off. I can't do it anymore.
Planned Parenthood. The other issue deals with the WIC program, other kinds of social safety network that deals with these 25% of children and families that are living in poverty. Okay? All right. When we talk about cuts, in terms of, we got to reduce the budget, 84% of this budget deals with Medicare, Medicaid, and our social service network. I don't think there are going to be very many folks in here who say, well, you're going to have to work 4 or 5 years longer before you qualify for Social Security. You're going to have to have a high copay in terms of your Medicare benefit. You know, it's been happened before. It has not. Well, it happened. Question is.
I got the question.
I don't see a way out of this except for our raising taxes to be able to.
Okay. Thank you for your commentary. Just a couple of observations about the bill that passed the House of Representatives, passed the Senate, was signed by the President to regulate Wall Street interests. In my view, the Wall Street interests bought their way out of that legislation, leaving regulations to apply to community banks across our state and around the country. Almost without exception, no bank in Kansas was a culprit in this scheme of making loans to people who couldn't afford to pay them back,
That's right.
packaging them and selling them around the world as investments.
That's right.
That's where the focus ought to be, and there is a role for the federal government in regulating criminal behavior, including prosecution, and we ought to make certain that we do not put our banks, particularly our community banks, out of business, because in the absence of access to credit, what we talk about when we talk about growing the economy, the ability to go to your hometown bank and borrow money is a huge component of whether or not we're going to get out of the mess that we're in economically.
Here, here.
I might add a little bit to this. And first of all, I appreciate the question, and I fully admit we're a divided country on these issues. What I'd ask, by the way, is that these are such important forums for me. I know they are for both senators. If we'll let anybody, whatever opinion they have, express that, let them get their words out, try to be concise, and we'll move on so we can hear as many people as possible. That's all I was going to say. So let's all respect both the right and the left, the center, the whole thing here. But let me just respond a little bit and say, I think you raised some very legitimate concerns, and those concerns, I'll address the budget concerns in particular. It's something Washington wrestles with. And what they have done over time, because of their inability to choose, just to reprioritize, is we put ourselves in a situation where we have borrowed so much money that we are heading towards bankruptcy in this country. And we can ignore this problem we're not going to be able to ignore this problem forever. It is going to be relevant and front and center to us if we do not deal with it quickly. And so, unfortunately, there are a lot of good things. I didn't relish having to cut a lot of things. These weren't things that I was excited about eliminating, but I have a duty to the Constitution. I have a duty to the taxpayers of this country, and we have to stop spending money we don't have.
The gentleman's point was raise taxes. In my view, we don't have a tax problem, and you can't convince me that raising taxes will reduce the debt, because every piece of evidence I've seen, when Washington gets more money, they spend it. It's never used to reduce the underlying debt. It may be different. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My issue has to do with energy. Okay. Thank you. My issue has to do with energy, and I am not against at all wind, solar, any of that. It should be in the private sector to develop. Why do we not hear more from all of you on the good technologies we have to drill on land and to use our resources that we have responsibly? I'm not against a little regulation to make sure that the oil companies use the technology correctly. Why don't we start now? I don't hear it. We should hear nothing but that as far as energy is from you all. Thank you.
I mentioned energy in my opening remarks, and I would tell you that I like Kevin, have been in office 6 weeks. I am working hard to develop what my kind of core issues will be. We talked about budget and spending and deficit, the U.S. economy. That's clearly at the forefront. But I'm looking for that opportunity to be a leader in a particular issue, and I can tell you that the one that appeals to me the most, that I'm studying at the moment to see if I can become the champion of, is an energy policy in this country that increases the opportunity for us to produce jobs and energy in the United States. The T. Boone Pickens ad, I don't know that I agree with all of his policy solutions, but the ad that we used to see has $800 billion of smoke going across the screen. If you care about America, you care about jobs, surely there is a portion of that $800 billion that we can recapture here. Now, I was pleased to see President Obama say that we're going to continue the process of drilling in the Gulf. But the reality is the permits are not going to happen, have not happened. And so it's on the one hand, we're saying we're doing something, on the other, we're not. I come from Ellis County, Kansas, with a dad who worked in the oil patch. Ellis County, Hays is the county seat. We're the largest oil-producing county in Kansas. This is the opportunity for us to create jobs in Kansas and across the country, and we ought to have an aggressive approach to addressing our own energy issues here in America. Yes, sir. The guy in the blue coat.
Very important. What I'm curious is there going to be nothing if we don't do anything about security? It's our backward policies of open borders, but yet they're almost infringing upon our civil rights in an airport. When you're shaking down grandma, when she's anyone can walk across the borders, essentially, unchecked, and then we pay for their health care when they come here. How much is that putting us in debt? Okay, it doesn't matter. All these other issues are very important. And to all fellow veterans, thank you for your service because you understand the security issues at stake. The fact is taxes, the wrongful Planned Parenting, all that is nonsense. You guys don't understand how serious this is if we don't do something about our borders. And who cares?
Well, I care. So let me reiterate what Kevin said. We've got a lot of people who have a lot of very strong views, and that's a good thing. That's what democracy is all about. Let's everybody respect another and see if we can sort of keep it down to a reasonable level, a meaningful dialogue, if you will. Let me just touch on the security part of it, in that having served on the Intelligence Committee and predicted some of this with some of the analytical product that really makes sense, it doesn't come to me any surprise that the drug cartels are wreaking havoc in Mexico, something like 35,000 deaths in the last couple of years, and now Americans. And Americans are being killed. And not to mention those people who live on the border. I'm quite familiar with Bisbee, Arizona. I was down there some time ago when I was trying to seek my fame and fortune as the William Allen White of Arizona. But it has changed dramatically down there. It's a war zone. And that has implications as it flows up north. And yes, it also comes to Kansas. We do not have law enforcement here in the numbers that we need to help really curtail that, a flood of immigrants. I will say that in terms of immigration reform, nothing is going to happen until we get to the point where we can prove to you, sir, and to everybody in this room that we have a secure border. I think there is great bipartisan support for that to Congress. I know that the governor of Arizona is talking about it publicly, so is John McCain, and so is John Kyle, so is virtually everybody from Texas, New Mexico, whatever, and should be from Kansas because we have the same problem. So rest assured we understand it. It's a difficult issue, but whatever it takes, that's what's going to have to take.
I wanted to ask the guy in the door who didn't get in the room to ask his question.
For this guy. Because we actually, I think, have the same question.
Okay.
I know this guy.
We'll see if he agrees with you.
Okay, well, all right, well, I'll take this one and you got another one, because I'm sure you have other questions. Okay, my name is Chuck Weismiller. I'm with the local chapter of Normal, and I'm sure you guys know of us, and I really don't imagine you guys support what we're doing. But you gotta admit, we're spending a lot of money on the prohibition of marijuana, and it hasn't curbed usage. We've got 15 states now with medical. Pardon, I'm a little weak. I came straight from work. Anyway, and this is my first time speaking in a room with this many people. Thanks everybody for coming out. Anyway, yeah, so we've wasted enough money. We haven't stopped usage. It has medical use. There's been over 20,000 studies, a lot of them done by our very own government, which came back with the consensus that marijuana could be a good thing. Now, I'm not even saying we'll necessarily make money taxing it and regulating it, but I am saying you guys keep talking about ending programs that don't work, and obviously our war on marijuana has not worked. We were just talking about the Mexican cartels. You know what? It's not going to kill their business. I've already come to the conclusion. It's not going to kill their business if we legalize marijuana, but that is a large part of their business. And if we take that away from them, then we can center on the real drugs. We can center on cocaine. We can center on heroin. We can center on the drugs that are addictive. We can center on the drugs that have overdoses, and we can center on the drugs that have organized violence attached to it instead of people like me, my cohorts, because this is the war that you're waging. People like me, hardworking people who choose to use a natural substance that's safer than alcohol and cigarettes. I'd love to see marijuana legalized, regulated, so our children can't get it just like alcohol and cigarettes, because it's easier. I got pot before I got alcohol, because dealers don't ask for IDs. So anyway, my question to you is, how do you guys feel about that, and what are you doing in Washington? 58% of Kansans support medical marijuana. What are you guys doing? Again, I don't really expect you guys are going to support this, but you wanted to hear from us. This is how I feel. So,
does the guy next to you want to say something?
Well, I have a completely different question.
All right, let's. Matt, see.
These are just more political and other realms.
Why is everybody pointing to me?
Good to see you guys.
I remember this very, very, very vividly because it was some years ago. some years ago.
You weren't smoking, Pat?
All of a sudden, somebody said, well,
didn't
yeah,
inhale.
I smoke marijuana, but I didn't inhale. And I got
Yeah, right.
You know, this, prompted a reporter from the Raytown News, i.e. the Kansas City Star, who asked the delegation at that time, and Jim Slattery admitted that, yes, he had used marijuana. And then they asked Dan Gleckman, he said, well, yes, he had used marijuana. And then they asked me, and I said, well, no, I hadn't, and I never have. And then they asked me why. I thought that was a little unique, and I said, well, we were smoking grapevines out by the 4-H barn. I don't know if you want to legalize that or not. The thing that bothers me is that there is a connection with people who smoke pot, with all due respect, marijuana, and the next step up. And because of the peer group and everything else and the peer pressures, they say, well, pot's fine. Well, it isn't fine, with all due respect. And then you go on up here to the next one, and you're into hard drugs. Now, there's an argument. William F. Buckley, the great conservative, said that we would save a lot of money if we legalized all of these drugs. And there are countries in the world that have done that. The public support is not there. I'd have to see some very clear evidence that worries me about that next step up in terms of youngsters who would then go from one thing to another. So I respect your views, but you don't have my vote.
My name is Jeff Caldwell, and I'm the 3rd District Coordinator for the Libertarian Party of Kansas. And
Libertarian.
Yes.
my main concern is the future of the country. And what I see happening is a response to NAFTA and a CFR, Council on Foreign Relations report that came out called Building a North American Community. And George Bush also got involved with the Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America. Now, my concern is the highway that they're talking about building. And it's not reconstructing a new highway, it's reconstructing the old highway. Like I-35 stretches from the base of Mexico through Canada. And my concern is government shouldn't be involved. If it was the private sector, that'd be fine. But there's politicians involved in this, and certain people are going to benefit. There's going to be certain people that are left out. So my concern is, what is our national sovereignty going to look like if this is constructed, and how do you feel about that issue?
Let me just say that in the last highway bill some years ago, we were able to complete a lot of projects in Kansas that had been laying in wait for many years. We do not have enough money now to have a highway bill. We do not have enough money to authorize or appropriate money for a brand new national highway program. We have those who want to build high-speed transit. I know John Kerry wants one from San Francisco to L.A. Why, I'm not quite sure. He's from Boston, except he wants one from Boston down to Florida. But that's not going to happen. We do not have the money for it. The idea that we would somehow, how many lanes you got in this thing?
Well,
what, 10, 12, 14, what?
I don't know, but the
Yeah,
north...
12. Okay, there's 12. We do not have the money to finish Highway 10 going to Lawrence, which is the high-tech corridor, let alone this damn thing, and it ain't going to happen.
The lady back here gave me the microphone.
Okay.
Okay. My name's Neil Leon. I want to get back to a point that got brought up before about the military is the way to solve the problem. We need to spend more money to the military. And also, we cannot spend money on those programs that will prevent the rampant distortion of education, of position in life that exists today. I'm not going to name anybody of them because last time somebody named some of them, they got shouted down. But we are doing things and paying money for punitive action in the terms of the military, using a hammer where maybe negotiation would be better. We are willing to spend money on prisons instead of preventing those prisons from needing to be built by providing proper education, which includes the education of the parents of the children. How do we resolve those two discrepancies in everything that I've seen brought up over the last couple of years? Spend more money to the military, but we have to cut social programs. Spend more money for prisons, but we can't even fund schools. Why in the heck are we doing that?
In regard to education, most of the issues that revolve around the funding and the application of the operation of schools, rightfully so, belong in Topeka and locally here in Johnson County, Kansas. I get asked, when I'm in western Kansas at a town hall meeting in Tribune, they will say, "Senator, what are you doing to make sure our school doors remain open?" When I'm in Johnson County, I will get asked, "Senator, what are you doing to make sure we maintain the quality of our education in our school district?" Though the answer to those questions is this, in my view. That is, those decisions are going to be made locally here, not by a Department of Education in Washington, D.C. But where we can be helpful, where I can be helpful, is we need to get rid of the mandates that make no sense, such as No Child Left Behind. And the ones that we have that the federal government insists that we do need to be paid for if we believe they're important, such as special education for special needs students. So we ought to be working toward paying for the things we require, but we ought to be requiring a lot less than we do from Washington back to schools in Kansas. No Child Left Behind, in my view, is a terrible intrusion in our education system. I voted against it when it passed, and it is an expensive proposition that is based upon a flawed premise that all of us, 99% of us, are the same. We are not. Every student can improve, and there's a piece of good news. For the first time since No Child Left Behind, an application by McPherson School District, supported by Senator Roberts and I, were successful in getting a waiver to create their own standards for their own students so they don't have to spend money trying to comply with what Washington, D.C. wants them to do.
I am just going to do it. How many of you here are senior citizens? How many of you have children? How many have grandchildren? How many have teenagers?
How many of you believe I've lost control of this meeting?
In this cut, the 61 billion?
Billion.
Yes.
Not enough.
One of the programs is the Poison Control Center. We take 150 calls every day from the state of Kansas. They are elderly every morning who double dose, miss dose. There are teenagers who are in trouble that can't call the parents. There are kids. I have written so many death reports on kids. I don't want to do that anymore. Our budget was $29.3 million. Sounds like a lot. They cut us $27 million. $2 million for every poison center across this nation. I have the data here to prove that just in Kansas, I saved Kansas $15 million. We can't afford to shut our poison control centers. Senator Roberts is worried about the, terrorism. Who are you going to call? We are experts in radiological, biological, and chemical warfare agents. You're going to close this all down? We have a surveillance system that surveils the whole United States every 3 minutes for incidents. You're going to shut that all down? Who's watching? Don't shut the poison centers down.
I'll kind of respond, and I appreciate the passion that woman has on this issue, and clearly very invested in it, and obviously a program that does make a difference. Let me
say one more thing. For every dollar that you spend on a poison center, you save $15.
And so every group that comes before the Appropriations Committee tells us, and I'm not trying to belittle the point here, ma'am. Every group says if you spend $1 with us, we're going to create $8. We're going to create $9. And this is the choice for this country. We have to decide whether we are going to borrow and spend our way through this, or whether we're going to ask government to live within its means. And if we're going to ask government to live within its means, then we are going to have to make some tough choices. We cut $61 billion. We have $1.44 trillion left to go. And so that's the struggle here. And I'd ask a kind of a follow-up question here. How many in this room believe that today that they have a better standard of living than their parents did a generation ago?
She said save, not borrow.
How many of you believe that your children and grandchildren will have more opportunities than you had in your life?
No.
This is the problem. If we're borrowing 40 cents...
She said save, not borrow.
Thank you, sir. If we're borrowing 40 cents out of every dollar that we're spending from our children and grandchildren, what are we really doing for children when we're leaving them with a legacy of debt and despair, high interest rates, and joblessness? We have to turn around the spending in this country, and that may mean some of these things have to be done on the state level. I agree with Senator Moran. I wouldn't support the continuation of No Child Left Behind. We need to remove these things out of the federal government level and move them back to the local level. There are a lot of things we're spending money on that folks in Washington argue save us money. In fact, I sat in a committee meeting where a congressman argued that in order to cure the deficit, we need to borrow more money. And her argument was, when you borrow money and you spend money, you're creating wealth, therefore people are paying back into the tax rolls, and that fixes the economy. This is the debate we're having in this country, and unfortunately, we can't do everything, and that's why we're having some really tough choices in front of us.
Kevin, how can you turn down a family? I assume that you're a family.
Thank you. My wife and more than 1-year-old are here to express concern for immigrants in our country. We have been blessed to know immigrants from across the world. They're members of our church, they're our co-workers, they're our neighbors, and they're our friends. We know that immigrants are hardworking, resourceful, intelligent people. We believe that they should have a path to citizenship, not only for their own benefit, but because this country can capitalize on all the gifts that they have and integrate them into this society, just like generations past have integrated immigrants and capitalized on their hard work ethic and ingenuity. And we feel like it's very important. I know on Senator Moran, on your website, you say that you support some reform, but you want a secure border first. But you know, the issue is, my concern is that too often I think that's used as an excuse to say, well, until the border is secure, we're not really going to do anything. And I don't know that it's feasible to have a 100% secure border. I think it's not. We've seen the wall cost $1 billion. That's 53 miles have been built of the 2,000-mile border. A lot of proposals, but I don't know that a secure border is 100% secure border is ever going to happen. And if we're waiting on that to give people, 12 million people in this country, some relief, some rights, some freedom, a chance to reach their potential, young kids who want to go to college, who want to get a meaningful job. We're waiting on that to invite these people into our society. We as a country are missing out on benefiting from all that they have to offer us.
I continue to believe what you've read on my website, which is before you can create any opportunity for people to become citizens who came here illegally, you have to secure the border. Otherwise, all you do is encourage other people.
How do you secure the border?
I think we have a very inhumane system in which if you try to come here legally, you get caught in a mess. Our bureaucracy is, my staff who work for you will spend more time trying to figure out somebody who did not. The example I can use best at home is every year we get a call from a custom cutter in Colby, Kansas. He cuts wheat from Texas to North Dakota every year. There are not enough, in my day, high school seniors did this, and they worked that wheat field, that wheat harvest all summer long. Today we employ people from South Africa, from Ireland, and in order to do that, you've got to get a work permit to come here, but by the time our immigration service grants the work permit, harvest is over. We have a system that is broken that needs to be addressed, and you can talk about it in economic terms, but it also is an inhumane way of treating people who, if they try to abide by our law, find no satisfaction. Having said that, I'm still a believer that you got to fix the border before you can reward. Otherwise, we just encourage more people to break the law. Yes, ma'am.
Several people have addressed the border security issue. It goes a lot deeper than this highway this gentleman was talking about. it started coming to light under Bush's administration, the Security and Prosperity Partnership. Obama's administration has renamed it the North American Leaders Summit, and he has recently had meetings with President Harper in Canada and also the President of Mexico. And I have a whole handful of information here.
I'm happy to take it.
Well, I will give it to you. I'm of the strong belief at this point in time that our borders, they have no intent of securing our borders because they want to open it up for global trade and economy. And you guys are going to have an opportunity to vote on a bill, it says late March or early April, concerning an agreement that they just did on long cross-border trucking dispute between Mexico and the U.S. and Obama and Calderon, the President of Mexico, have just this month had a meeting about that. So I don't think the administration, both the last administration and this one, have any intention on closing our borders with this, and it's going on under the table. They are purposely keeping it out of the public eye. I would call on all three of you to start making this a conversation in the public arena so all of us can be abreast of what's going on, because we will be losing our sovereignty.
Why don't I give that a shot? Well, it's not only Bush. It goes past to Carter. It goes past to I forgot who was president. Well, Reagan and then Carter, and then we went to I think. I know it was under Truman, and probably FDR as well. You forgot the Bilderbergers, you forgot the Rockefellers, you forgot the Council of Foreign Relations, and the what was the one that kept meeting secretly?
Trilateral Commission.
Yeah, the Trilateral Commission. How could I forget that? All right. So these worries, very serious worries, have been around for a long time, and I'm just going to tell you once more, there's no money for it. There's no support in the Congress for it. Yes, there is support, Congress, for trade pacts that we have been trying to enter into with South Korea and Colombia, and yes, Panama, but that's to help our farmers and our ranchers who export a third of our wheat crop. If we didn't do that, we'd be in a world of hurt. And so, but that has nothing to do with arranging some kind of secret compact here to get rid of our sovereignty. Nobody in the there may be a few, I don't know. We have all shapes, sizes, and kinds, but and with different thoughts. But none of us here are going to give up 1 inch of sovereignty. And so I can promise you that in terms of the budget, the money's not there. It's not supported in the Congress. I understand the information that you have is very worrisome. I will tell you also that we're very balkanized in this country, and everybody gets their netherworld of information from a particular source, and you sit and read and you think, oh my goodness, what's happening to our country? But I'm just trying to tell you, once again, there's no money for it, no support for it in the Congress, and it ain't going to happen. We're not going to give up 1 damn inch of sovereignty. Okay?
Kevin? I'm glad to share the burden of picking. Sure.
Eliminate the Internal Revenue Service and its database, and
Oh, wow, that's a big one. Whoa.
Nancy.
Get rid of the IRS.
Get rid of the IRS.
Kevin, I've mentioned this before at your last town hall.
Yes, ma'am.
If you're really serious about reducing the deficit, and many of you ran on following our Constitution, it's real simple. You defund and get rid of every single cotton department of this, that, and the other thing that is not among the enumerated powers of that Constitution. That's for starters. That would include the Department of Education. People need to understand there is little correlation, some of course, but little correlation between revenue spent and an academic outcome. We are not doing very well in this country against other nations. Thank you for your time.
Let me try to address that. Got a better idea. Maybe it's not a better idea, but it might be a feasible idea. It's a wonder to me that this hadn't happened already, but when I go into a public meeting any place in Kansas, it doesn't any difference who I'm talking to or what business group or what agriculture group, education group, healthcare group, whatever. By the way, we met last week with all the healthcare providers in Kansas, first time they ever met together. Figure out what are the top 3 things that are wrong with Obamacare and what we could do to fix it. So we're going to have a lot to say about that. At any rate, usually the question comes, Pat, what in the heck are you doing back there saddling us with all these regulations that have no cost-benefit reason to them all? They defy common sense, they're about to strangle us, they're about to put us out of business. My response to that is, I'm not a you guy, I'm an us guy, and we're trying to do something about it. Now, give President Obama a tad bit of credit. He came out with a statement that said, I am issuing an executive order so that all the federal agencies, your primary, there are 13 of them, but there are more than that, have to go back over all the regulations that they have promulgated, that's a Senate word, a bureaucratic word, all the regulations they have put out, and all the ones they plan to put out, which are drowning us like a Katrina wave. You wake up one morning on a Tuesday, your lawyers, your CPA, or you just read it in the newspaper. I didn't know about that. On the IRS, on the 1099s, IRS says now, well, it applies to goods, but not services. Seriously, come on now, guys. There are over 2,000 people in Washington, pardon me, 200,000 people in Washington that were not there 2 years ago. They're not twiddling their thumbs. They are agenda-oriented. So let's take the president up on his executive order. They said, let's go through all the agencies, say, whoa, wait a minute, let's take all the ones that we looked at in terms of the regs, and then all the ones we're pouring out, and put a cost-benefit yardstick to it. Guess what? You can do that, but there are several loopholes. If the secretary of the agency says that it's in the public good, that secretary can ignore it, go right ahead with the regulations. That prompted the EPA to stand up and say, well, all of our regulations are fine. Now, I'm not going to go into that any more than I said that. Then the other one is basically that you have a paragraph that goes into it that you have to measure this qualitatively in terms of human kindness, etc., everything we would agree on, but it's absolutely amorphous. I don't know how anybody would get that done either. Now, there's a third loophole. I mentioned the public good, I mentioned that, and if you're an independent agency, of which there are many. Well, this prompted everybody to stand up and say, that's a doggone good order, and we're going to do it, except we're not going to do it because we're exempt. Well, I've got a bill that codifies the President's executive order. I quote him, we take away the loopholes, and what a brand new day in America would it be if we actually got that bill passed. I have about 33 co-sponsors, including Jerry. I got to go over and reach across the aisle and grab me a few common sense Democrats and get over 50, and then see if the President would actually veto the executive order that he has promised. Now, that takes a lot of work, but maybe that's just as good of a proposal as yours to take their money away from them, although that does tend to get their attention.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I know it's been kind of a hostile day, it seems like, in here, and I'm not meaning it, this question hostile in any way. We have a lot of, we have a lot in common. I've actually been in your office many times asking for funding for the breast cancer research program. Never been supported by it, but I've been there. I'm currently a student at Fort Hays, a single mom, and I went to KU years ago, although I still wear my blue. I'm just kidding, on different levels. But my main question here today, or my main concern, I guess, is that with the new legislators and the new legislative session, the 112th Congress, and even with our state legislators, women have often been thrown under the bus, I feel like. We're losing funding for Planned Parenthood, or Title X defunding, which goes to more than Planned Parenthood. My concern with that is the LJ World did an article the other day that 45,000 women would be affected by those loss of those services. And to be clear, we're not talking about abortion. We're talking about cervical cancer screenings. We're talking about family planning, things that would prevent abortions. And I want to know how you feel about that, what your future stance on that will be when that comes through the Senate. And I also have a concern as I used to work at a homeless shelter too with teenagers. The average age of the homeless person in the U.S. is said to be 9, and in Kansas City it's said to be 7. That's in Kansas City right here. I know it's hard for us in Johnson County to realize that some kids don't have a bed to sleep in at night. They don't have a meal to eat unless they happen to go to school. I'll get to that, sir. These women and children are suffering right now. We're not helping children who are already here at adequate rates. And we can't say we are as long as there are homeless children and long as 1 in 4, 1 in 5 young women are victims of sexual assault and, all these other things. We're not funding, by taking away funding for women's programs, my concern is for not only my future, but my son's future, what's going to happen if his mom doesn't have access to these services? What's going to happen if his generation doesn't have them?
And the programs actually save tax dollars.
Yes. Well, I know you said that's an argument that's used a lot. These programs save tax dollars, but it is a valid argument in this case. And I think when we talk about investing in our future, we're not wasting dollars. It's good use of money.
Well, I appreciate the question because it goes to the heart of this debate we're having. We've kind of had this discussion today. You raised a lot of very valid concerns. On the Planned Parenthood issue, my obligation and my position that I told voters I would do is I would not support taxpayer dollars going to fund abortion or to go to fund agencies that provide abortion. Wherever you are on the issue, and I know we're divided in this country on the issue, I think using taxpayer dollars in that way isn't right no matter where you are on the issue. Regarding some of the other what are very big social concerns that we need to be concerned about in this country you've raised with homelessness, breast cancer research, all sorts of things, and your concern for your son and what sort of life he'll have. This is our challenge. The federal government is, and it's the same conversation we had before, we're unable to fund these programs. We're borrowing 40 cents out of every dollar. My hope would be that at the federal level, we focus the federal government on the things we expect that the federal government should be responsible for in that limited constitution, and we ask our states and our local communities to take up those situations where they can, I think, provide a better service in a more efficient manner.
But they're not.
And so the question is, should we borrow money from your son's future?
Should we?
So that we can provide these services now. I just think we've borrowed too much money and we can't do it any longer. And that's a tough thing because we're having to tell a lot of good programs now. I toured Head Start last week. Nobody wants to cut Head Start. Right. These are tough decisions. And unfortunately, I'm sorry, some of them are affecting things that go to the heart of many things you're passionate about. And that's the unfortunate challenge we've had with decades of overspending.
We'd like to thank Congressman Yoder, Senator Roberts, Senator Moran for taking their afternoon this Sunday. Big round of applause.
We had two mayors join us, Ken Bernard of Lansing and Mike Boehm of Lenexa, and we appreciate Johnson County Community College's hosting us this afternoon. Great to be on their campus, and I'm honored the fact that 200 people would take time. It may show the nature of what challenges our country faces that people care so much, and I still believe that people make the difference in the decisions that we make. So thank you for coming. You're welcome.
5%.
You look very familiar.
Of the program that we have.
Nice to meet you.
My thought is we could do a better job of prioritizing the programs. Look at what that number does. Because we're all hung up on numbers back there. And the numbers are fine. I went through this where we cut $33 billion out of the WIC program and out of all of the food stamp program back in 95. $33 billion. Now the program was fraud with fraud and abuse, and we were able to do that. I don't think anybody's ever done that before or since, $33 million out of one committee. But we tried to do it in a way where we shaped the farm program and the nutritional program so that we didn't leave people falling between the slats. And that's what you're talking about. So if you can talk policy and not numbers, and say, look, within the numbers that you have to cut, within you feel you have to cut, in this case, $100 billion. I don't know what would happen if we did 98.2 or 101.2. 6, that doesn't mean anything to me. I want to know, as a result of these cuts, which is a minuscule part of the budget, are we accomplishing something, or are we doing something with a law of unintended effects? And that's what you're talking about. And then you got to say, okay, state and local, what the heck do we do as well? And work at it. Okay? Got it?
Thank you for the advice, and I appreciate your time.
But you know, in the